The political campaigns taking place today are about power. But the cushion on which the power sits is money, resources. A scan of most of the candidates' manifestos points to these priority sectors: agriculture, health, unemployment, education, tourism, energy, infrastructure, and of course corruption. To accomplish most of the things on that list requires money, and yet evidence shows that money is allocated, but never does sufficiently what's allocated to do. So whichever government takes power come February, what are the problems existing and what might help? The problem is in the systems. There are two systems to government: the politicians and the bureaucracy or the technocrats in the departments and agencies.
Poor, effective utilization of the resources that we have, that requires room, effective collection of revenue, effective planning, effective investment, the whole process, that must be addressed.
We have so many people in this country who are holding big posts in terms of technocrats who have ideological problems. There are those who are comfortable working for the World Bank. You'll find people admiring what's happening in Rwanda. They don't tell you what's wrong in the country. That kind of ideological bankruptcy is a very big problem.
But the politicians will point fingers at technocrats. Yet the politicians use their power to step on the toes of the technocrats.
You see this tension between the political players and the bureaucrats. And that means it actually shows there is a long way to go for Uganda in terms of providing the public sector the professionalism it needs and the independence by which it needs to perform.
So the acrimony between the politicians and the technocrats is a bottleneck to be fixed. Outside the technocrats, the politicians themselves are a problem. It lies in patronage, and this is where the conflict with technocrats sometimes arises.
There must be strategic sector intervention. How can government help under the public-private partnership, help those sectors which are critical? It must be deliberate, it must be planned. So it cannot be that one wise businessman thinks correct and is helped and others are not.
Still on the politicians, some officers have a lot of power. They can override allocation systems, including that of Parliament.
The President acts sometimes outside the budget framework. He goes to Bugweri and says, you want a school? I have given you a school. You want a hospital? I've given you a hospital. So we now budget for money which has already been actually allocated by the President. But there is no systematic way of the President pledging, and that disturbs a budgetary process.
Also, out of parliamentary allocations, fiscal indiscipline, usually emerging out of what government calls emergencies, causes monies allocated for particular projects to be diverted. One of the biggest cancers that the next government will have to deal with is stealing of government funds, otherwise called corruption.
If a minister is corrupt, how is he corrupt? He can never be corrupt except with the knowledge of the permanent secretary. But if the permanent secretary knows that his supervising minister is corrupt, what do you expect of this permanent secretary? He will also dip his finger in the public tea.
So what can be done about this bleeding problem of stealing of taxpayers' money?
You need a government, a leadership with the political will to fight corruption. We have an anti-corruption court. We have parliamentary oversight committees. You have got the Inspectorate of Government. You have got the Auditor General's office. But do we have the political will to use this infrastructure and fight corruption?
Along with the identified problems are suggested solutions. The biggest is to deal with corruption and seek to affect attitudes. But there are those which are more easy to tackle.
Reduce the size of the public sector. That's what I would tell you. Big government is bad for business. Government must exist. But the more you reduce it, the more you reduce the problem that you have on your hands.
So what we need is to do some resource focusing, some resource concentration, so that we have impact. We can no longer just continue with talking about economic growth. The economic growth must be transitioned to economic development. And that requires some kind of big a Marshall plan, a big push to finance the NDP.
Whatever amounts of money the government will have, plus all the beautiful plans, it takes people and proper systems to deliver. And while the current government has started with accounting officers, the technocrats, the politicians are still virtually untouchable.